Okay. And I think we're good to go live on. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think we're good to go live on.
And I have co-host power
I can double check that.
because I'm going to share our homepage here.
Mm-hmm. Cool, cool. We should be live on. Live video is starting. We're live on Facebook. And going to pull us up on GCPR radio. All right. Going live in 3, 2, 1. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello to all our listeners. Hello to everyone on GCPR Radio, listening to us on the One Pair of States Facebook page, and also if you're happening to tune in post-recorded on podcast platforms, Spotify, YouTube. Thank you for being here. You are here for the second inaugural episode of To Your Health, right before the election. I'm Simon Hutton, One Pair of States Communications Director, here with my co-host, Chuck Benacchio, One Pair of States President. And we've got a big episode up ahead of us. Thanks, as always, to GCPR Radio for hosting us on their radio platform. And thanks to everyone tuning in. Today we're going to be talking a lot about the election. We're going to be talking about how the election and how it's going down ties into our fight for universal healthcare, healthcare justice, health, and everything connected to that. But we're also going to take some time to reconnect, talk about healthcare stories, as we like to do, real people and the real problems they have in the American healthcare system, and just staying healthy. We have a couple guests coming in to join us for that purpose, and I'm going to toss things over to my co-host, Chuck Benacchio, to introduce them or give you a little preview.
Okay. Thanks so much, Simon, for kicking off. Yeah, episode 2. We're 12 days out from Election Day. Nerves are rattled about. Yeah, I'm planning to go up to Philly again this weekend and next weekend to knock on more doors in the what they call the collar counties, the 4 counties that wrap around Philadelphia. I was last time in Bucks County. Next, I'm going to be in Montgomery County, and pivotal election having a lot to do with the work that we're doing to achieve healthcare justice for all. And our program today is I think going to be a real winner. We're going to be discussing the pathway forward for universal health care using the November 8th election, the November 8th, November 5 ballot box and beyond is our objective here. And our guests for this month's show are Nyabinghi Kuti, who is out of Los Angeles. He's a harm reduction consultant, and also our board member extraordinaire, Michelle Hamilton, who's Assistant Director at the Center County for Women's Resources Center, previously on domestic violence, and also is running the shop at the homeless advocacy group or housing advocacy group in Center County, North Central Pennsylvania, near State College, where Penn State's located. She's also president of the National Organization for Women in Pennsylvania. So with that, we've got a very good show coming up. And yeah, let's just bounce around a few ideas, just catch up on what we're doing here in our respective worlds. I'm in Washington, D.C. Again, lobbying myself back and forth to Pennsylvania, my native home state, where I cast my absentee ballot the other day, and excited about the prospects of having a successful election, certainly on behalf of our agenda, achieving universal health care.
Yeah. And I should note that this show produced, as you can both tell, we're both part of One Pair of States. One Pair of States is fighting to win universal health care for all Americans through the states, supporting, organizing, coordinating groups in states across the country to fight to win universal health care in their own states and eventually achieve a comprehensive national one-payer universal health care system. Anything to add on that note, Chuck, about one pair of states?
That we are an organization that I'm just going to share this for folks who can see it, but I'll just read it for folks who are just listening. And that is to just remind folks of why we do what we do, who we are. And yeah, let me just go over to our page and go to Zoom and share again. And yeah, this is our homepage for those of you who can see it. It's at onepairstates.org. And just to remind folks, we've been around since 2009. The organization One Pair States, we named ourselves One Pair as a way to sort of depoliticize a little bit the conversation, and it's been a very effective way of framing the work that we do. One pair is another way of saying single pair, but as I lobby on Capitol Hill, if I were to walk into their offices and say that I'm with single pair states, I would have about 3/4 of those doors shut in my face. 3/4, about half the Democrats and almost all the Republicans. That's the kind of framing and language that we need to figure out, and we have figured out. So what we are, One Pair of States, we're a consortium of 25 state campaigns, some multiple campaigns within those individual 25 states. We fight to win, and we fight to win high quality, cost-effective universal health care for all. And it's our theory of change that, based on American history, the structure of our federal constitution, the example of Canada and other nations around the world, that if we model this at the state level, the chances of our achieving our objective of getting to a national answer, national expanded and improved Medicare for all, are much greater, because we have battle lines. We compete in multiple states simultaneously, and we have several states that are really leading the charge. And so we're pursuing a path to universal health care through the states. And that specifically centers on our work in support of the State-Based Universal Health Care Act, which has been in the House of Representatives since 2015, first introduced by Jim McDermott of Seattle, then Pramila Jayapal, also of Seattle, and then more recently picked up by Representative Ro Khanna of California. It's HR 6270, and we're asking people to contact their representatives if they're not on with the bill. And also, for the first time, we have a Senate bill that was introduced on July 25th by Senator Ed Markey, along with Senator Elizabeth Warren, also from Massachusetts, and Jeff Merkley from Oregon. We're very excited. First time ever that our bill is present in both the upper chamber, the Senate, and the lower chamber, the House, and excited to get through this election and then continue rolling our sleeves up to do the work during the lame duck session, November 12th to the 22nd, right up to Thanksgiving. And then there's another lame duck session, and it'll take us into December. And we continue to build support, educate, and move people on this legislation. So the SABUCA bill, as we call it, the State-Based Universal Health Care Act, is where we center our work primarily. But we also work in support of every other campaign that is pursuing the same goal of national universal health care. And that is that we are educating people as to the disadvantages of so-called Medicare Advantage. We're now in the open enrollment stage for people who are on Medicare. So it's important to understand here that the Medicare Advantage, is what it's called, is been co-opted by private insurance, and they're actively undermining the Medicare system and its longer term health. So be alert to that. And also, we're supporting all efforts to stop the privatization of Medicare, as well as supporting the national bill that's run by Pramila Jayapal in the House and Bernie Sanders in the Senate. So one pair of states were active on all fronts, working at the local level, the state level, regional, which brings states together to collaborate. We have exciting work being done up in the Northwest and in New England and other spots in the country. And I'm here on Capitol Hill. So we, for the first time, one payer, single payer campaign has got a presence on Capitol Hill, building those relationships with Capitol Hill staffers, which is really vital and is the reason we were able to get a Senate bill accomplished this year. So very excited about the work we're doing, Simon.
Great. Great. Yeah. And in 20 minutes or so, we have our first guest, Michelle Hamilton, dropping on in. If you wanna drop the screen share you're currently doing, Chuck. But after all that, I just want to take a moment to say, how are you doing? How are you doing, Chuck? How are you doing today?
I'm reminding myself to breathe. I mean, these are tense times, and for folks who don't know, my background is that of an historian. I've been an activist really since I was 13. So, and now being 65, that's counting the years. That's 52 years in the trenches, doing the work on the doors, grassroots organizing. Worked for 4 U.S. senators, a House member, and worked on issue campaigns, and now most recently the healthcare campaign. But I started environmental issues, consumer rights. I'm a labor organizer, effectively, successfully organized my colleagues at University of the Arts in Philadelphia. Previously that to Delaware Valley College in Bucks County, organized junior faculty there within the union campaign. And then organized graduate students when I was at the University of Colorado. So my background is organize, but also grounded in research and writing in American history and politics, which gives me a real duality, if you will, a sort of a double barrel approach here to the work that we do. So everything that we talk about here is informed by that educating ourselves, educating others, making ourselves precise in the language we use when we talk about this bill, and reaching back into our history and reminding ourselves that we've done this work before. We've accomplished so many things, guaranteeing movement at the state level. Slavery, ending slavery, that movement started at the state level. Women's suffrage, ending child labor, and then bringing more to the present, same-sex marriage, marijuana legalization, and so forth. We've had tremendous success working through the states, and it's important to remind ourselves that that's really grounds us, in our work and building relationships, and also being centered on a strategy that is designed to win. What we're going to talk about in the last quarter of the program, the last half hour of the program, we're going to do some work on what we call radical visioning and seeing that success and then asking ourselves, how did we get there? Actually seeing that success of accomplishing a world of healthcare and health justice for all, which is our vision at One Pair States, healthcare and health for all. We can have the best healthcare system in the world, but if we don't have a healthy society that are food secure, that are housing secure, that are free of police abuses, that are fully invested in addressing and fixing this climate crisis that we find ourselves in. We need to do all that work and to partner with others. That's how we build the movement. That's how we succeed, through relationships and building broad-based coalitions.
Cool. Well, I just took a nice hike yesterday, so
Nice.
I'm feeling good about that. I'm not able
Where'd
to.
you go?
There's a new a nice walk just about 30 minutes away from where I live. It's through some wetlands. I'm sort of enjoying the fact that Oregon hasn't gone totally into the rainy season yet. We're getting some nice sunny days still going out into, mid to late October. So I got out
Beautiful.
there and took a pretty several mile long walk out there enjoying the last rays of sun that are going to be consistent for a while. But okay, well, enough beating around the bush. To an extent, I think it's, perhaps time to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, or the donkey in the room. Like my political humor, Chuck.
Love it, love
Yeah.
it, love it. And I should have added that not only am I learning to breathe better,
Hmm.
but I also get in my 10,000 steps a day. I really do push myself to do that. Really critically important for mental health, and balancing the work that we do, which is very intense, really. When you're working in a field where people's lives are literally on the line and people are really suffering in a dysfunctional healthcare world. We need to, it is important, as you indicate, Simon, that we balance each other out. And for folks who didn't know, just to repeat what we said a month ago, but Simon has made several treks across the country, and we've been collaborating, working together on Capitol Hill, lobbying on Capitol Hill, learning what that's like. We collaborated at the Netroots Nation, the largest gathering of progressive organizations anywhere in the country, during a week in Baltimore in July. And then we met up again in Chicago and had just a really great meeting with Progressive Central, primarily sponsored by Progressive Democrats of America. And it was a great chance then to meet up with Representative Pramila Jayapal and really take a deep conversation around strategy. And the takeaway from that was that that we need to coordinate our steps. We need to coordinate the work that we're doing at the state and regional level with what's happening at the national level. We need to be partnering. We need to be communicating with one another. Really critically important to an effective strategy, that we're respecting each other, that we're messaging consistently and effectively, and that we're adjusting our messaging to our target audiences. If we're talking to more conservative members of Congress or a business community, you have to project yourself in one direction that's speaking to the economics of healthcare primarily. If you're talking to social workers, if you're talking to nurses, it's a different conversation that centers more on what it is that's going to be effective for their patients and for their clients, and centers the conversation on the moral imperative of the work that we do, and then the conversation to the more general public that makes it easy and accessible so that people can really understand it in a way that connects to their lives, their daily lives. What does universal healthcare mean for them? And what does it mean in terms of how we're going to be approaching the ballot box? And people have already, by the millions, have already voted absentee, as I already have. But we want to make sure that we're connecting this conversation around this election to the health of our country and the healthcare system that needs to be fixed in a big way.
Yeah. Well, you already pivoted right into what I was going to talk about there, the election. Uh, yeah, I want to hear you sort of lay out the stakes. One way or the other, both ways. What are you thinking about healthcare and universal healthcare, health justice, and this upcoming election? Like, what are your thoughts? Less than 2 weeks out, where we're at, what we need to do, what we need to prepare for.
Yeah. One thing that I recently came across that I want to share with our listening and viewing audience is a campaign to deal with the third party candidate phenomenon that threatens to bring Donald Trump back to the White House. And if we roll the script back to 2016, Jill Stein is running again as a Green Party candidate and is targeting only the swing states. And she denies that she wants to have that she's playing the spoiler role, and yet all the evidence indicates otherwise. But I'm not here to attack Jill Stein. But what I am here to say is that there's a way to remedy that and bring us together, and that's a campaign known as SwapYourVote.org. If you just Google SwapYourVote.org, it will bring you to a campaign that's designed to connect voters in swing states who are really not happy with Kamala Harris. And we hear this about Gaza, other issues and so forth. Let's keep it real. But connecting them with somebody in a swing state, or I'm sorry, in a safe state, a safe democratic state, let's just say California. And so connecting somebody who wants to vote third party, we'll just say Jill Stein or another candidate. And rather than having them cast that ballot, which effectively helps Donald Trump, have them cast their ballot for Kamala Harris and have the person in California who might otherwise vote for Kamala Harris vote for Jill Stein. That way, Jill Stein's votes are going to, or her popular vote will be the same, but that will not endanger the prospect of bringing a fascist back into the White House. And this whole conversation about fascism is something I've been talking about and teaching about for decades. And finally, it's come off the lips of the Democratic presidential candidate. Just the other night, the town hall that she had on CNN, she was asked point blank, is Donald Trump a fascist? And having studied this, I've known for a very long time that yes, indeed, he checks all the boxes. But when you get somebody like General Kelly and General Milley coming out forward, his Joint Chiefs of Staff head and his former the guy who ran his office, right? His chief of staff, as well as the Joint Chief of Staff, have both resolved and said publicly that Donald Trump, in fact, is a fascist. And fascism is not nearly a dictator in pursuit of one who wants to be a dictator, but more specifically, it's an extreme right-wing ideology that marries state corporatism. This is how Benito Mussolini described it. State corporatism, the marriage of state power and corporate power, and a lot of Democrats are complicit on that one. But the other two of the three cornerstones are white supremacy or white nationalism in the case of the United States, and the other is religious nationalism. I did a deep dive look today into something called the New Apostolic Movement. It's the evangelical movement that a lot of people puzzle over. Why are people supporting Donald Trump? A lot of people who identify as evangelical Christians are supporting Donald Trump because they really have come to be convinced that he has been appointed by God, that he is their savior, that he, even though he may be crass in his speech, even though he uses foul language, is very misogynistic, very racist, that's just the peculiarity of God. God wants you to be tested to support this person who's going to help advance the goal of establishing our nation as a Christian nation. That's fascism right there. This notion of Christian nationalism, which would obliterate the concept of separation of church and state, as well as to weaponize the racial injustice that comes at Black and brown and queer and immigrant populations and women in the United States. That's Project 2025. That's this project by the Heritage Foundation that many of us have done a deep dive study in. So it's those three cornerstones of fascism that we need to overcome. So getting back to the idea here of swapping votes, again, go to swapyourvote.org and you can partner up. If you're in a swing state and you're tempted to vote for a third-party candidate, connect yourself there through that website with somebody in a safe state and agree to vote the other person's ballot. In other words, if you're in a swing state, vote for Harris, even though you may be holding your nose in doing so. That doesn't matter as long as you cast your ballot in that direction. This is what we need to be doing in terms of advancing our healthcare justice agenda. One Pair of States is not a 501c4. This is my own personal plea to people. I'm taking off my president of One Pair of States hat and saying, take a look at swapyourvote.org and see how we can be effective at preventing a fascist from coming back into power, somebody who wants to establish himself as a dictator on day one. And you establish yourself as a dictator on day one, and guess what? you're a dictator. And he wants to shred the Constitution, and he wants to put women in a box, and he wants to, as he says, deport some 15 to 20 million immigrants in the United States, some who are not yet citizens, but others who are citizens, actually legal in the United States. He wants to kick them the heck out of the country, and that would devastate our economy. And most specifically, it would devastate the healthcare infrastructure, where so many of the workers in hospitals are immigrants. These are people who are on a path to citizenship, but they keep the healthcare system that we have, as damaged as it is, they keep it afloat. So swapyourvote.org is a great way to be effective at the ballot box over the next couple of weeks, right on through the election of November 5th.
So you've certainly laid out the stakes. So that being the case, what would you say the path forward is if Donald Trump wins for the movement, for universal healthcare justice?
It's all hands on deck. I mean, it's going to be an emergency moment if he were to get in. My radical visioning actually visualizes Kamala Harris as this bridge candidate. People can have questions. She's not a perfect candidate, not by a long shot, but she has come out recently and said she's down with the idea of expanding Medicare to allow home care for elder citizens, to allow resources to support home care by family members and health workers in the home. That's a major step. That's very important. We're working with Pramila Jayapal, who wants to take down the Medicare eligibility age from 65 to 60. That's a significant step. We would also like her to consider, and other members of Congress, to expand Medicare to include those who are from the moment you're born until you're 18, maybe out to 26. So bring Medicare down in terms of age eligibility and up from the bottom, so that we have more people in the system, and it brings more political strength to the fight to get Medicare expanded and improved for all Americans. So that's the bridge campaign. That's how I look at this campaign. It's a vote for anti-fascism, as well as a way to get us to that next step. But if Trump were to get in, that would require a dramatic rethinking of our strategy in the moment and what it is that we're going to be doing. But it also accelerates and highlights the importance of the work we're doing at the state level, because the states can move forward, whether they get the enabling legislation, the SABUCA, state-based universal healthcare legislation, they can still move forward. And so I think the activism and the activity at the state level is going to accelerate even more if Trump were to get into power. But I think first things first, let's do everything we can between now and November 5th to come down with a pro-healthcare justice outcome. And right now, one of two people are going to win this election, Harris or Trump. You decide. And swap your vote is a great way to do that if you have ambivalence at all about the supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
So then it's fair to say that you don't see Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as equivalent when it comes down to the healthcare justice, universal healthcare movement, or anything else. You don't see them as equally bad.
Not even close. I mean, actually, if you dig in, just do a quick Google search on Project 2025 and then do a search on healthcare, and you will come to those pages in that document that says that Donald Trump is committed to radically privatizing and destroying the Medicare system, the Medicaid system, Social Security, and virtually every platform that provides a social safety net for Americans. That's the design. It's radical privatization, all profits, all the way, everything to the service of the billionaire class, Wall Street, Silicon Valley.
Michelle, you're good to have you in here. Your mic is unmuted at the moment. Do you think you could switch your name in Zoom over to into your just your name so people are able to identify? We'll have you on in just a second. Michelle just joined the call, and we're going to be pivoting at this half-hour mark and talking with her about healthcare stories. You know, we've been talking a lot about the election, stakes on the table. I think it's good to take a step back and think about why we're doing this work. You know, why are we doing this work? Why is it so important? What's the human cost? You know, how are Americans, people living in the United States, suffering, struggling, with the current realities. I will take a moment to remind you that you are listening to Your Health, which is produced by One Pair States at onepairstates.org. We are currently live on our Facebook channel, One Pair States Facebook, GCPR YouTube, and GCPR Live Radio. Thank you if you're listening on one of those platforms. And if you are listening post-recording on a podcast platform, YouTube, or Spotify, and I encourage you to check us out at onepairstates.org. We fight to win universal one-pair healthcare for all people in the United States through the states by fighting for legislation at the federal level to be able to empower states, strengthen states to win universal healthcare, support states so that we can achieve healthcare transformation throughout this entire country. And I would now like to welcome in Michelle and give yourself a quick introduction, who you are, and maybe a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. Good to have you here, Michelle. Oh, you're muted at the moment.
Good to be here. My name's Michelle Hamilton. I currently live in Center County, Pennsylvania. So election things are pretty much very much on our mind too. I work at an organization that supports survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Currently, I do that more in the role of a counselor and a legal advocate. But before that, I worked in our shelter and also with several shelters in our region. So issues of homelessness and healthcare are a really big deal to me, as are issues of people who are dealing with trauma and access to mental health care, which is something that sometimes we don't talk as much about in our one-payer state world. And finally, just people who are working and have really terrible health care and the long-term implications of that. I am a board member with One Payer States and with several other groups, and I'm glad to be here. So I'd like, do I just launch into stuff? You guys asking questions?
No. Go ahead, Chuck. You take it away.
I just wanted to welcome you in as well, Michelle. You are heart and soul committed to universal transformational justice, justice across the board. And we think globally, act locally. Think nationally, act statewide. Just keep that fluidity of activism going, supporting one another. And you are really the consummate warrior, justice warrior. Very proud and happy to know you as a friend and as somebody who we've fought side by side on so many of these fronts. You in Pennsylvania, and with origins in New York, going back and your roots back to Jamaica. We'd love to hear your stories today, about why it is that you do this work that you do, why you're committed to justice generally, and more specifically to healthcare justice, but how your work in those other fields in which you are active, including National Organization for Women, reproductive rights, and you come at that also from the perspective of somebody who's active in a church, in a religious community. So we'd love to hear what's on the top of your mind and to share that with the audience. And, after talking for a couple minutes, let's just sort of break it down and just have a conversation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So as Chuck stated, I do come from a lot of different venues and pots and stuff. I did grow up in New York City, and so a lot of my advocacy sort of does come from that, because I grew up in the time of the AIDS crisis and also the beginning of mass incarceration of people for substance abuse. And that was sort of the beginning of my advocacy in New York. But when I moved to PA, I think in some ways I got a broader vision of things, including homelessness and healthcare. So for a large part of my working life and also non-paid life, I've been working on issues of homelessness. And in New York City, what I saw was more street homelessness. And so I thought I had an understanding of things. But when I lived in PA, and as I live now, I realized that the number one homelessness situation is of couch surfing, of going from home to home to home. And that is actually, so we actually don't have a super great number. Any number that you think of homelessness, multiply it by way more, because there are many more people who are couch surfing and going from couch to couch to couch. This also opens them up to the possibility of exploitation. So within my job as a domestic violence and sexual violence counselor, there are people who take advantage of that, to take advantage of people who are dealing with homelessness and chronic homelessness. Um, but also, there has been an increase, especially in our county, in what's called this vehicular homelessness, where people are literally living out of their cars. And there's various reasons for that, but the net part of it is that there's a definite connection to health in terms of one of the number one reasons that people are dealing with eviction, dealing with being unable to pay a mortgage is because they are sick and unable to, work, or unable to pay bills and stuff, or the bills are too high, the medical bills, all the bills, but particularly the medical bills. It's like a sort of trap where you get sick, you can't afford to be well, so you can't afford to pay rent or the mortgage, and there's an eviction. You're dealing with an eviction, or having to consistently move to always find a semi affordable place to live. And that constant moving sort of messes up insurance and stuff. There are certain times, for example, as we all know, where you have to re-sign up with certain things and you don't, and things lapse. And these greedy corporations, they don't care. And then you get sick. It's like an ever ending spiral. And one of the things that I particularly learned when working with a group called Out of the Cold Center County, which is one of our shelters here in Center County, is that a huge amount of people who are dealing with homelessness and housing insecurity are working. But our jobs, as we know, what we call jobs have changed, and many people are working jobs with no kind of medical support at all. So they're working and stuff, but they don't have the health care, or they have very terrible health care, and they're not making enough to really subsist. And so one of the main issues that a lot of times people would have when they would come into either the domestic violence shelter or the general homeless shelter is signing up for benefits, which is incredibly complicated, not at all easy. In fact, my county has realized that it's not easy, and our adult services department is actually rolling out a program to help people to sign up for benefits, because it's one of the number one issues that people who are dealing with housing insecurity have, is that they are unable to, it's complicated, it takes a long time, and services are not gotten that could help with their long-term health. Um, so, being in that role and stuff, it's sort of difficult, and it's actually one of the reasons that I joined One Payer States, because I would be sort of on the front lines helping people sign up for things, trying to help people as much as I could patch together something and stuff to try to, you know, stay healthy if possible. But I realized that while it is incredibly helpful to be helping people one by one, we really need a broader push and a more political push. So I always see politics and voting and all these things as a yes and, sort of like in I don't know if you guys have ever done improv, but the whole purpose of improv is you yes and a situation. So voting, very important. Cannot ignore that. But voting and I think for me, one payer states and similar groups definitely became a voting and stuff, where I could be working with people one on one, and at the same time working on creating a better community for them, where hopefully we won't have a bunch of people living in their car because they got sick, didn't have the insurance, lost their job and couldn't pay their rent. So it's a both and type of situation, and a both and kind of situation that also includes mental health as well. So, as part of my work, obviously, I work with survivors of trauma. And in fact, I literally just got back from doing a support group. Um, and one of the major things that is sort of desired, wanted, needed for both physical and mental health is access to therapy. And that is something that insurance wise is often a huge barrier. As we know, certain insurances are not great with that. And many insurances aren't, or they pay for so many, but not enough sessions, or they won't pay for certain types of more innovative therapies that survivors of long term trauma, of trafficking, um, things like that really need and deserve in order to help heal. And so, once again, I think that one of the really great things about one payer states and similar groups is that I can be supporting people on one level while trying to create a world where in the future people won't have to jump through all these hoops to get care on another level. Um, I also really am attracted to this work, yes, through the National Organization for Women and the multiple sort of issues that we are trying to work on, particularly reproductive health in both directions, both in terms of abortion care, but also in terms of maternal care. As anyone on this call knows, America has an abnormally high, especially for people of color, especially for Black women, case of maternal mortality. And there's various issues for this. Definitely, there are elements of sexism and of medical racism and classism and ableism. But another issue that sort of also affects it is the lack of access to healthcare, the insurance that doesn't pay for the things that it could pay for and should pay for, because it's about making a profit and not about giving people access to the healthiest maternal care. And so, um, since I'm also part of another group that is the Pennsylvania Religious Coalition for Reproductive Justice, and part of what we do, in addition to supporting bills around these issues, is really giving people of faith a ability to talk about things, because I do feel we have allowed the religious right to control the narrative around this. But many people of faith are actually pro choice and are pro reproductive justice. I think that sometimes we just lack the language and the space to really be as public about it as we should. But one of the things that we also are working on with that organization is a more one payer state mindset, because one of the things that also affects access to reproductive care on all ends is insurance itself and what insurance will pay for and not pay for. Um, and then I think finally, before, one of the things that really, especially with COVID, sort of kept me in this movement, because it's hard. You're fighting all the time. Chuck can tell you that. And then occasionally you'll have a positive, happy thing happen and stuff. But we are fighting, big pharma. We're fighting a huge thing. But one of the things that sort of keeps me involved is that during COVID and stuff, we definitely saw, the effects of, you know, bad health care and stuff, on people literally dying. But it also, through my friends who were working what are called essential jobs, but not getting essential pay, let's put it that way, um, they really suffered the most. And part of why they suffered was because of the insurance industry. So I have a friend, he currently still works for the same place, so I'm not going to mention the place that he works. Um, but he works for a huge grocery chain, and he was an essential worker during the COVID time with non-essential worker pay. And it was during that time at the height of COVID that, yes, he did have health insurance, but they decided to move from Blue Cross Blue Shield, where there was a lot of coverage, to the less expensive for them, more profit for the organization, for the business, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, which is not where my friend lives. And so because of that, when he had far less, like literally one day he had tons of insurance, and literally the next week he had practically no insurance. Um, and when he did get sick and had COVID, his options were very limited about, where he could get better care and stuff. And now he does have long-term COVID. And, you know, part of that is sort of the lack of places that accepted the insurance, also that his corporation could make more money during the COVID time and stuff. And so, in many ways, we talk about sort of, people who are underinsured or uninsured, but I also feel like in this movement, we need to talk about people who are insured, but their insurance just isn't good, or people who are shackled to their job because of their insurance. Because even though this insurance was not good, my friend felt like I can't just work for a place with no insurance. I can't not have it. And so, in some ways, insurance, if your job offers it, can be a shackle to your job. And then, is that really freedom? If we're talking about freedom in this sort of theoretical way, I think sometimes, we also need to talk about, like, if you are working a job just for health insurance that most of the time is not good anyway, are you really quote unquote free? So I think I will just leave it at that. And if you all have questions or statements or things that you want to know more about or push back on or whatever, I am very open to that.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I don't know if you saw the message there, Simon, but Jeff was trying to reach us with, he said there was some feedback. So just for our purposes, when we're not speaking, he suggests that we mute ourselves.
Okay.
I put that in the chat. But now we'll just, hopefully we're good at this point. And so, yeah, Michelle's muted herself. So I'll ask you to unmute yourself in a second here, but you covered a lot of ground there and made just numerous connections. I mean, lots of puzzle pieces that shaped out to be a really clear picture of so many fundamental issues that speak again to the corporate hijacking of our healthcare system, again, which is one of the cornerstones of fascism. This is the word that we need to keep bringing back and educating people about, this cornerstone of state corporatism, which is the design of Wall Street, as you said, Michelle. It's profit first. It's not for profit we're talking about. It's profit first. And this is something I think all of us need to wrap our minds around, is to understand the way that what we call the four health care or four medical horsemen from hell, especially insurance, but also pharmaceutical, medical device, and big hospital chains, is that they prioritize making money over providing health care. And that's sadly and tragically driven by the profit-centered, profit-first mentality that dictates on Wall Street. So what we have really is capitalized healthcare on steroids. So I really appreciate you raising that, and also just connecting all the isms that unfortunately serve to divide and conquer on the part of the billionaire class, especially at the top of the food chain, and the way that rather than the fingers being pointed upward at the billionaire class is effectively using through all sorts of mechanisms, right? They're using all sorts of ways of dividing and turning us against one another. So that when people are feeling pain, they scapegoat persons who are more vulnerable than them, let's just say down the food chain, if you will, if you think about a ladder of spokes, and that folks who are beneath them, people are punching down and blaming people who are beneath them, who in fact are vulnerable and being taken advantage of, being exploited. And rather than looking up, rather than punching up, which is what we need to do, and to hold to account not only the billionaire class, but their servant political class, right? The electeds, the people who take the money from the corporations, get themselves elected, do the bidding of those corporate interests, and then in many cases, for more than 500 retired members of Congress, they go from they go from Congress to corporate world where they make multiples of money because they've proven their loyalty and their commitment to those corporate interests. And it becomes, as you said, Michelle, this sort of vicious spiral. So it's really a bait and switch kind of a situation, right? Where people want to play by the rules, but the rules are so stacked against their ability to function, to prosper, to live a decent life, that they are stuck. And the last thing you mentioned, just to highlight it, or one of the last things you mentioned, is the problem of job lock, where people are afraid to leave their jobs because of the fear that they'll lose their insurance even for a short period of time and put themselves and their family members at risk. And what that means is that we don't have a creative economy as a result. It stifles creativity. It stifles entrepreneurship. And your answer to a lot of this is to work in these different worlds, in seeing these problems as they connect, and then working with people to find solutions at all levels, including the political level, the legislative level, all the way down to the casework level that you function at. So I just wanted to drive home your brilliant connectors and see if Simon, if you wanted to add anything to that, and then throw it back over to Michelle, and then we'll be bringing in Nyabinghi, who's up on screen now at the top of the hour to talk about his work. But do you want to add anything to that, Simon, and then throw it back over to Michelle to put some wrap-up comments? Then we'll have Nyabinghi on for half an hour, and then we'll do the last half hour from 7:30 to 8 Eastern time, which is what, 4:30 to 5 Pacific. We'll have a conversation about radical visioning, how we see our work leading to this successful outcome, right, which is healthcare and health justice for all, and then have the conversation about what did we do specifically in your own visioning to get us to that positive result, that sort of utopian society. So Simon and then Michelle and then Nyabinghi will bring you up at the top of the hour.
Before I say anything, do you want to respond to anything specifically that Chuck said before I pile on to it, Michelle?
No, I'm good. And stuff. Pile on.
Okay. Yeah, well, I thought what you said about freedom was very interesting because, we talk, Americans are big about freedom. We talk about it a lot. But there's, two different kinds of freedom: positive freedom, negative freedom, right? And there's like this sort of the idea, the negative freedom being the idea of like free to do whatever one wants, like free to, live however one wants. But then positive freedom, which is being given the ability, be essentially, and you can respond to this. My understanding, positive freedom is like being given the ability, being empowered to be able to live the life that someone wants. And that would be something like having access to healthcare, not, living out of your car or being on the street, and not being able to live the life one wants to live, right? A lot of what you said seems to relate back to that. I'm wondering what your and I want to sort of tie this back and ask you, how do you see is that what you're talking about when you talk about freedom, like giving people the freedom to be able to live and have the lives they want to live, being provided that by society?
Yeah, I would say that that is a big part of it and stuff. I do think that a lot of this, what do we have? A lot of, I have to say, it's my favorite word. Chuck knows what the word is. It's neoliberalism. So, it's, and not to get too away from the case management on the ground world, but we have really trained people to have an expectation that government cannot, should not do things. Like there were times during the COVID time, and I don't know if you and Chuck heard this, where people would be like, government." um, like I can get a burger from Five Guys in like 20 minutes and tip my person, and government can't do this and they can't do that, and blah. And I think that big market interests have really pushed this narrative so that as citizens, we feel like we don't have a right to ask for things, but we have a right to be healthy. Um, as someone who is like, my health issues are not so terrible, but definitely there have been times when it hasn't been great. And, that prevents us from doing so many things. So, access to the medicine and the healthcare that we need to be healthy is a human right and should be a human right. And a lot of voices have tried to like divide us up and make us think that that's not the case. But illness is the one thing that honestly connects us all, regardless of how you may think politically at some point, either because you get older or an accident or an illness, we are all going to get sicker and at some point need access to good care. And so we have to get out of this thinking of just just the personal and just that, government can only is only there to like pave the roads, and whatever. It can do more if we ask more of it. Um, and we deserve it. And to be honest, we are paying for our politicians' health care. So I'm pretty sure, you know, whoever the president is will be able to go to the therapist anytime they want because we will be paying for it. So we should be getting some of that back for ourselves. Um, and so I think that part of like while I'm not in my job, I do not push any kind of ideology because I cannot, and also that's not, what I'm there for, and also not empowering. I do try to talk about, what you deserve in order to heal and not being afraid to ask for it, um, as part of something that is helping you towards, healing and growth. And I think that one of the things we need to do within, which we are doing, honestly, there's a lot of things that we're doing right. Sometimes on the left, we talk a little bit about all the things we're not doing right, but there's several things we are doing right. But is this idea of this is something that is a human right and something that the government can do. They just need to be encouraged to do it by us. um, and also sort of as seeing it as a yes and it is voting and it is activism and it is doing things in your community, because while we wait for this greater world of universal health care, people still need to fill out those applications now. So it's all three, and it's just whatever our particular talents send us. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
That's excellent analysis. I think both of you, Simon, I think you jumped on a really good connector there. One of the most loaded words in our vernacular, our political lexicon, which is freedom. What is the and just to remind ourselves even of the four freedoms, which you're sort of indirectly referencing there, that FDR talked about, why we fight, why we fight fascism, right? And why we were fighting to get out of that Great Depression of the 1930s priorities. So there are a lot of people in pain today who really are suffering. A lot of people are in economic and mental depression here in the United States. We have to own that. We have to understand that. We have to address that. Michelle, you addressed it brilliantly, both through your own personal work, professional, and your political work. But the four freedoms, right? Freedom of speech and expression, that's a positive, speech and expression. Freedom of worship, or choosing not to worship. That's a positive freedom that FDR identified as one of the four reasons why we fight. And then on the negative side, or the side that we need to address also fundamentally, and that is freedom from want and freedom from fear. And if you flip all those things, what's the fascist narrative that's coming at us from the Charlie Kirks of the world with Turning Points, or Richard Viguerie, who's one of the leading thinkers on the far right, or the Heritage Foundation? They've with absolute audacity, the right wing has claimed that they are the protectors of speech, right? This is what Elon Musk says, all about speech. Well, in fact, he's emphasizing hate speech, speech that divides us. That's fascism. And this notion of freedom of worship, well, the Christian nationalists only want a particular brand of a particular sect, if you will, of religion. They want that ideology imposed on the whole of society. That's fascism, Christian nationalism in particular, but you get that religious nationalism that spills out in a number of other religious forms. And then freedom from want. We want healthcare. We need healthcare. And that's something else that the fascist ideology wants to deny us, to keep us suffering and clawing and being right on the edge of our existence. And then freedom from fear. The fear is that coming at us is from the right wing is the fear of the other, the othering, right? Of those who are less well off, those who are vulnerable, and those who are blamed, scapegoated for the problems that in fact emanate from Wall Street, from the billionaire class. So I just want to just applaud you both for underscoring and really delivering a wonderful presentation, Michelle. So I know you're going to jump and run, and you're going to join us at 7:30 Eastern time. Is that right? We got you back in half an hour?
Yep, half an hour.
Okay, we will see you then. And then we've got Nyabinghi Kuti, or is it Kutai? We'll get that straight. And Simon, why don't you do the next transition, reintroduce the program, right? And then bring up Nyabinghi. Thank you so much.
Yes. That was a great segment, storytelling with Michelle. Yeah, you're listening to Your Health. We are produced by One Pair States. You can find us at onepairstates.org. And we fight to win transformational, universal, one-payer healthcare and healthcare justice for all people in the United States. We work with states across the country and fight at the national level to empower states to be able to win those universal healthcare plans within their own states. And I will also say, as I have been remiss, we will have another show in a little over a month. Normally we land on the fourth Thursday of every month at 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. However, savvy listeners may know that this coming November, that is Thanksgiving Day, so we will not be going live on that day. However, we will be coming back the next week on December 5th, the Thursday of December 5th from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. So thank you if you're listening live, listening on GCPR Radio, Facebook Live, or post live on our YouTube channel or Spotify podcasts. And now I'm going to bring in our next guest to maybe pivot things a little back towards discussion of the upcoming election, healthcare, health justice, and his own work, Nyabinghi Kuti. Thank you so much for joining us. You want to introduce yourself and get us rolling on this next segment?
Greetings, Chuck and Simon, and thanks for inviting me. I'm Nyabinghi Kuti. I'm the director of the Los Angeles Harm Reduction Network, and our primary goal within the organization is to address the gaps in addiction treatment especially related to the opioid and fentanyl overdose epidemic that we're finding here amongst our homeless community in Los Angeles. And I really appreciated a lot of what Michelle said, because no place is the failure of our healthcare system in Los Angeles more glaring than amongst the homeless population. And the county is primarily responsible for behavioral health, addiction treatment, and mental health services. And there's just been millions and millions of dollars allocated for this treatment that's, the outcomes are very poor. And COVID exacerbated the situation, especially in the Black community, where we saw record numbers dying from COVID, Black and Latinos as compared to the white population, because of our poor healthcare system. So that's my introduction. Is this going to be a back and forth, or you just want me to go on and on and on? I'd rather have it back and forth.
No. We can have a back and forth. No,
Yeah.
I actually, I'm kind of wondering how you feel at this moment. You know, Chuck and I at the start of the program talked a little bit about framing. It's this episode is sort of inevitably framed by its proximity to the election. In terms of your own work, what you've seen and what you do with the harm reduction, how are you seeing the stakes for the communities you're in of this upcoming election? You know, obviously we have the presidential election, but we also have state elections, local. Like, what are your thoughts in terms of the election and as things stand at the moment?
Well, one big thing that I'm looking at, I mentioned it on one of the last OPS meetings, is the chance of flipping the House. It looks like we have a good chance of getting a Democratic majority in the House, which would really be good for our Medicare for All movement. And that way it will be easier to bring bills to the floor and things like that. So, but overall, I'm not a real big believer in electoral politics, because here in California, we have a supermajority. We have a majority of Democrats in our legislature, and we have a Democratic governor, and they have still failed us on Medicare for All. So it's more about campaign contributions and the medical industry's heavy influence on our electoral politics, on our electoral politics system. And until we build a strong enough movement to push back against that and eliminate the campaign financing structural problem that we have in our society, as long as healthcare is profitable and based on profits, it's always not going to serve the people properly.
Yeah, and I think there's I'll let Chuck cut in a moment, but you know, when I think about Medicare for All, you know, taking the profits out of healthcare and many other issues, you know, it sometimes feels like I think electoral politics is very important, but it's very important for minimizing harm. The way I sort of look at it, you know, we can minimize harm, but it really is the work beyond the electoral politics that has to be done to actually achieve real change, you know, achieve Medicare for All, achieve universal health care, achieve things that truly make people's lives better. I mean, I do think that things will be worse if, you know, if the Republicans were to sweep the election, if they were to retain control of the House and everything. But I think it's very important that I think of that in terms of minimizing harm, not necessarily making real progress, you know. Did you have thoughts, Chuck?
Yeah, I appreciate your opening comment there, Nibingi. Thank you for joining us. You have a lovely day in the background there. Love your profile picture. Yeah, I mean, for somebody who did their high school and college education in California, my heart's always there. My sisters live in Pacifica, up the coast, and went to school at Cal in Berkeley, and love the work that we're going to continue doing, and building bridges, with Barbara Lee to Kamala Harris, build bridges with LaFonza Butler, who is the interim senator, will step down at the end of this term. Likely Adam Schiff gets elected. Build relationships there. These are two people who very possibly could be part of a Harris administration, right? Barbara Lee, LaFonza Butler, and Alex Padilla as well. It is frustrating, I know, to be in a state that is led by what people are by people who identify as progressive, ostensibly progressive, and yet where's the courage, right? Where's the courage to actually do the right thing? That is frustrating. I share that with you all the way. What I'd like to do is to get, let me and this is going to anticipate a little bit the next segment, but I think that's okay. Is I think correctly, you're right. I think you're correct in saying that we've got to create, I think, a mass movement. What does that look like? In your mind, what is it going to take to create the numbers to really hold these people's feet to the fire, and quite literally scare them, right? And that may include, and one of our tools is primarying candidates who are just not doing their job, right? That's the electoral piece of it. But in terms of while they're in office, what do we need to do to actually move them to enact the single payer legislation in California and really dig in and solve this homeless crisis that you deal with. You deal with the fallout from that. Michelle talked about that in her earlier segment a little bit because that's where she's worked. So what is it what needs to happen for that change, that real fundamental change to occur in your view?
Well, I think that one pair of states is setting a good example. I just started being involved just from getting on the calls, and I was referred by someone from Healthy California Now, and I'm really impressed with the outreach that you're doing. I want to help to improve the reach of OPS. But just the fact that, on your website, you have meetings that are accessible to the public, and you're doing things like this. I think that these are the kind of things that we have to build upon. Being accessible, showing good leadership where people want to work with you. You have some really good people on your board that I'm working with on a regular basis. So we need more of what you're doing with OPS, and also there's a strong need for organizations within the Medicare for All movement to work better together. And I know I've had this conversation with you. The leadership, that to me, that's leadership. There's a lot of organizations doing single payer advocacy, but you don't see that in the outcomes. So that is something that we have been talking about, and we will continue to work in that area.
Do you have what do you think are the keys to getting these organizations to work together? Do you like to actually build that coalition, like how to approach each other, how to build those relationships,
Well, like I said, I think it's good leadership, where people want to come together and forget about all of the petty differences, because at the end of the day, everyone wants better health care. But here in California, we have some serious issues, which I think are very petty and could be overcome with some better leadership. And I think that our legislators are contributing to that conflict. They could be doing more, because they're supporting two separate pieces of legislation that really they conflict with each other: CalCare and SB 770. Even though some people say that SB 770 is a complementary bill to CalCare, CalCare really doesn't have the support that SB 770 has. And some legislators are supporting both. So that's just one example. I think that some better leadership can be shown in.
I was actually want to throw this question to you off of that as a long time, I mean, either of you can answer, but as I see it, the problem is, I mean, we have opponents, as it were. There are people who that want to mass privatize healthcare, want to, just get rid of the ACA, who want to, destroy traditional Medicare, on and on and on. But they're kind of like less accessible. The people that are accessible are the other people in the movement, and it's very easy to like dig in and find differences and decide what these people are doing is, hostile or actively counterproductive or sabotaging the movement or any one of many reasons. And those are the people you actually talk to, and a lot of people, mix between these organizations, so you have much closer contact with them. And so those people are much easier to attack, to spend time going after. I mean, I don't know if either of you have a thought on like, how can we deal with the fact that a lot of people who are very passionate with very strong opinions, the people who are more on their side are the people they have close contact with. So those minor divisions often end up taking more time than the much, much greater divisions with the actual opponents to our work. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just compliment what Nyabingi's saying, and by using the historic example of the civil rights movement here in the United States. And what the unifying phrase that kept people from infighting, and one of the reasons they landed on Martin Luther King is he had the least baggage among the Southern preachers. He had the least baggage. He was somebody who didn't have the that sort of history of infighting, fighting for parishioners, money, results, church size, so forth. And he was very capable of setting his ego aside, right? Very self-aware. I think that's something that's really critically important here. But the phrase that always rings in my ear, and I think we need to bring it back here for our work, is eyes on the prize. Eyes on the prize. Like, stop the bickering. What are we actually here for? I'll often say in meetings, are you folks here to win? Or is this just about having a policy debate and discussion over how many angels can you fit on the head of a pin? Like the personality issues are something I have to deal with on such a regular basis. It's so distracting and really it drains the limited capacity, the limited energy that we have. And to Nyabingi's ever-living, credit, it's great to have somebody come in from the outside and say, I've looked at these other organizations and what you're doing at One Payer States. Of course, you're not perfect, but you're self-aware and you're keeping people moving together. You're respectful with one another. I've had people come in and visit our board meetings and say, wow, you really have people working together who really care about each other and are focused on the task at hand. And I think that's what we need to learn and share and model, right, for our movement politics, not just in healthcare justice, but as we call it, health justice, all the other issues that you work on, specifically Nyabingi, as well as, on climate, housing, education. I mean, just right on down the line. We all need to learn to get along, right? We all need to appreciate each other, respect each other, and recognize that we have, right? We talk about this, 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much, if not more, than we were speaking. Nyabingi?
Well, on Martin Luther King, as I mentioned to you when we spoke earlier, that's one of my idols. That's someone that I look at as setting an example for me. But I want to make it very clear that he was an enemy of the United States when he got killed. He's a lot more popular now. He wasn't popular when he was alive. And I think that the same thing is happening to people now that are speaking out against war and injustice. The government, both the Democratic and the Republican Party, don't want to hear it. And, we saw at the convention how they squashed dissent. And so for me, it's more important to work in community and work with people, rebels. I mean, look at you, Chuck, and some of the people on the OPS board. You all are rebels, and you are going against the grain. And there's so much work that needs to be done, and very little resources are being put into the work. The people that we are opposing, it's no comparison to the organizing power that they have compared to us. And until we get that organizing down, it's not about money. We have a mayor here, Karen Bass. She ran against a billionaire, Rick Caruso, outspent her 10-1. She still won. So that was another example to me of, it's not all about money, even though money's a major factor. Money can be defeated the way she defeated Caruso was through a community-driven campaign. And she was a reluctant candidate. She didn't even want to run at first. The community begged her to run because if she lost, she would have lost her prime seat for life in Congress, like Barbara Lee just did,
Right. Simon, I've got a couple things, but I want to hear your thoughts at this point, Simon.
No, I'm actually gonna put you on the spot and shoot it back to you, and I'll and I'll drop in a minute later.
Everything Nibingi's saying, I'd love to just sort of paraphrase a different way of expressing, it's politics as usual that's killing us, right? It's politics as usual. It's careerism over public service. It's personal aggrandizement. We talked earlier in the program. I don't know if you were listening in, but the fact is that these politicians in Washington D.C., they any number of them come to DC, I think with good intentions, but then they become intoxicated, right, with the power. They become intoxicated with the rainmakers, the people who are the big fundraisers, and flatter them. Flattery really corrupts your spirit. It corrupts your ethics. I was listening to Cornel West, an interview he did with Chris Hedges, and everything he said, I agreed with. But yet, we're working. I have to work in the world of where political decisions are being made. And I am so very hopeful, radically hopeful, actually, that we've been developing a partnership with Pramila Jayapal, who is somebody who also was reluctant. She didn't pursue political power. She was an organizer for at least 2 decades in the community, working for immigrant rights, working on housing, working on healthcare issues at the local level, and she is, I would argue, the smartest person on Capitol Hill, not simply brain size, but this is somebody who understands inside outside politics, maybe better than anybody that I've come across, next to Ron Dellums, who was my mentor, the congressman who preceded Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee's right up there as well, understanding how politics needs to work in collaboration, in connection, and making sure that we're not separating our efforts and not listening to one another. We have to be intentional. We had this conversation about strategy a couple weeks ago. It was a beautiful conversation. We went on for almost 2 hours. It was just this fluid conversation that we had. And I'm so grateful that you're with us in this space and that you bring your perspective. And I appreciate your agnosticism, your skepticism about our electoral politics. I get that totally. Having gotten 4 U.S. senators elected and worked for them and a U.S. House member, and then worked on the outside on issues, I get the inside-outside with great zeal. I really, really understand and appreciate that. So, the whole idea here of keeping our eye on the prize, developing the strategy, being collegial, developing new models of leadership, diversifying our ranks, bringing fresh blood into the movement, and being mindful that this is one of my criticisms. I am open about this, is that in this healthcare space, every meeting you move into, whether it's on organizing or whether it's on communications or whether it's on or building the structure, the infrastructure, more times than not, the conversation will just drift into a wonky discussion about policy. And this is not unique to one pair of states. And I've been very, very intentional in saying with folks, okay, we have a policy work group. Let's carry that conversation over there. Let's stay focused on what it is that we need to accomplish here on communications or education and outreach, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing that really resonates with me in your own critique, Nyabinghi. That's why I really, really value in your openness. You're willing to have that conversation. So yeah, we have about 5 minutes before Michelle's going to come back on. But Simon, do you want to jump in at this point? And I'm going to step off camera. I need to get some water. Excuse me while I do that. We've been on for an hour and a half. I just need to get something to drink. Excuse me. I'm listening.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to ask the both of you, how do we deal with the cynicism? I mean, cynicism has gotten real bad. How do we reach people through their cynicism about politics? And even just in my case, I mean, I know a lot of people in my age, 20s, early 30s, that they just disengage. They don't want to engage with anything. They just want to shut it all out because their lives are hard and they don't want to. And it looks impossible. So how can we, as a mass movement that we want to build, address that cynicism?
Well, for me, it's basically setting an example. People can look at you and say, that is a good leader. That is a good organizer. Your outcomes show that. And OPS, even though it's not perfect, as Chuck said, it's still, the outcomes can be seen and they're good outcomes. So that's how you defeat cynicism and the naysayers. It's all about organizing. The person that organizes the best wins. And leadership plays a big part of that. You have to have good leadership to have a good organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, 100%. What I've discovered over the 5+ decades that I've been doing this work on the inside and the outside and teaching, right? Teaching history and politics for 32 years in the classroom. And I always remind people that, I was getting older while my students were staying the same age. So, I was just sort of growing and also organizing. We organized a successful union campaign where most faculty were resistant to it. They were afraid. And as I was going through the process, it was like I was a dead man walking. I really was. I was radioactive because the administration had caught on to the fact that I was in the middle of this organizing. But to the point of cynicism, what I came to a point in talking with people that so many people who are cynical are proud of that. They conflate cynicism with sophistication. They think that their cynicism, their negative view of the world, which in many ways insulates them and protects them, right, from failure, because they can say, see, I told you we weren't going to succeed. I told you we weren't going to pass that bill. I told you we weren't going to accomplish what it is that we set out. So people are self-satisfied and they conflate, they blend, they think that their sophistication makes them wiser and smarter. It's very toxic. Cynicism is very toxic. I view it as a disease. That's why I identify as an agnostic. And that in my academic training sort of reinforced that impulse within me, which is just to keep questioning and ask people, where did you get that information? What are your sources? Because a lot of people will just say things that they believe. And I mean, the polling has been done, and it's just gotten worse, is that most people think that their strongly held opinions are factual simply because it's a strongly held opinion. They think that that's right, that that's real. And that's a failing of our media system, our education system, And Abnai Bingi, you also made the point, I think, which is that it's like capture the flag. It's the financing of campaigns that becomes the main point of emphasis in media coverage. How much money did you raise when I ran for the US Senate? That was the first question I was always asked. How much money did you raise last quarter? I did 25 events, 25 public events. Why don't we talk about that? Why can't we talk about that? Why can't we talk about the organizing and the building and the connecting around issues and how we're addressing solutions? But no, unfortunately, the media is so focused on the horse race, which is about the money, it's about the polling numbers, rather than what is it that you're going to do to make our society a better place. So yeah, we're right at 7:30 right now. If you want to reset it, Simon, maybe bring in Michelle and then keep the conversation going around the question of radical visioning. I'd love to hear both your thoughts again, Nibingi and Michelle and Simon.
All right. Well, we're going to do this rigmarole again. You're listening to Your Healthcare, and it is produced by One Payer States. Where you can find us at onePayerStates.org. We are fighting for transformational healthcare justice, universal one-payer healthcare for all people in the United States. We are doing that through the states by fighting for legislation at the federal level to empower states to create their own universal health plans, and also organizing and working with states across the country. So we encourage you to come and check us out. Big thanks to GCPR Radio. We are currently broadcasting with them. We are also live on our Facebook page, and you could be listening to this post live on podcast platforms, our YouTube channel, and Spotify. And we are usually live on the fourth Thursday of every month, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. But this next coming fourth Thursday is Thanksgiving, so we will instead be live on the first Thursday of December 5th, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all. Thanks to our guests for being here. Thanks to GCPR Radio and all of our listeners. We are moving into our final segment, which is radical visioning, envisioning success on the eve of the election. We're going to cast our minds forward to having one transformational justice for all, universal one-payer healthcare for all. How did we accomplish that? How did we win that in the context of where we are now in the past, which is right before an election in less than 2 weeks? So you wanna ask the question and get the responses, Chuck? I'll toss it over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Just to bring everybody who's listening and viewing on the stream a little bit of context for this notion of what we call, or I call, radical visioning. For me, it was based on a rereading about 5 years ago of a book that I had read when I was a teenager. And I fell in love with this book. It's a utopian vision projected more than 100 years into the future. It was written by Edward Bellamy. It's called Looking Backward. And the term looking backward is is radical visioning. That's what it means to say that he wrote this book in 1887 in dystopian Boston that was in the grips of the Gilded Age, right, where people were suffering, people on the streets, things that Michelle shared in her comments, and Nibingi's dealing with in his work. I mean, you both are street level activists, people who are dealing with people who are in a lot of pain, a lot of suffering and fallout from a society that just doesn't value life, unfortunately. And we have a political party that calls themselves pro-life, and damn it, they're anything but, in my view. It's like pro-birth, and then once the kid's born, good luck. But nonetheless, that radical visioning was something that Edward Bellamy set forward. He wrote this book in 1887, and he painted a picture in Boston in the year 2000, 113 years down the line. And it was a utopian vision where people cared for one another, where there was no homeless problem, there were no drug problems, there were no issues about income inequality, that people took care of one another. It was a society that was a beautiful society, a good society. And that's a vision that I grew up with as a teen going forward. And then I kind of lost sight of that over the course of my own political trajectory. I was involved in so many campaigns, electoral campaigns and issue campaigns. and won almost all of them. But looking back, as Michelle says, neoliberalism was creeping up and really grabbing us by the throat. And I was not mindful of that until we got near the pandemic. And fortunately, we got this new technology, this Zoom technology, where we could actually connect across the country. So then the conversation began around, how do we develop a strategy that's going to produce that utopian or ideal outcome in the future? And the first step in this process, and then I'll open this up for some conversation, is to see that success, visualize that success, have that success at the forefront of your mind, and then ask yourselves, by way of reverse engineering, what were the steps that we took to win? What was important that we needed to do? And we've touched on many of those already today, but I think it's important to bring it together here on the fourth quarter of our program, and to emphasize maybe one or two key points. Nyabinghi, you've got a lot of great ideas around leadership, if you want to talk about that or whatever else you want to talk about. And Michelle, coalition building. And I love the way that you frame your discussion about what can we do? Vote, yes, and. So voting is obviously not enough. In fact, in a true healthy society, democratic society, democracy should be a way of life. It shouldn't be a once every 4 years or once every 2 years visiting the ballot box and then you're done. But it has to be a way of life. So maybe if you could address that question a little bit, Michelle, sort of expand on your yes and ideal or philosophy. And then Nyabinghi, if you want to talk about leadership or other issues. But this whole idea, again, of seeing that success in the future and what is it that we did, past tense, right? This is looking backward. What is it that we did to get to that success? And I'm going to say that we're going to get to universal transformational justice in the United States in the next, we'll just say the next 25 years. And we're going to get to universal transformational justice for the globe, let's just say in the next 50 years. What is it that got us to that point? What did we have to do? What did we have to be mindful of? And what did we have to work on? So, and then Simon, obviously you jump in as well. And I'll step back and take your comments. Thank you. Start with Nyabinghi, then Michelle, then Simon.
Well, in one of our previous conversations, Chuck, you talked about the Occupy movement, and I told you about that I felt like that was the strongest movement that's happened in my lifetime. And if it had been sustainable, it actually could have transformed society because it was international, and the people that were involved were dedicated. To see my friends camped out in front of City Hall for 2 or 3 months, I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And at first our Mayor Garcetti and all of the city council members were coming out there saying, oh yeah, you can stay as long as you want. And they were bringing food and providing resources. But after a couple months, they started saying, we really didn't mean stay forever. And they stopped helping, and then eventually it ended with the police raiding it and breaking it up. So I'm just using that up to emphasize your point. Radical change is possible. Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, they were moving in that direction. It is possible, but the system has us so brainwashed to think that we don't have an alternative but to go along with what they tell us to do.
Good, beautiful, beautiful. And I think for us and for everybody listening and watching, it's important that we clarify what we mean, or at least what I'll just say for myself, what I mean by radical. And that is dealing with issues at the root cause. That's all it means.
Structural.
Right. The term has become so toxic in the hands of people who don't want real change, right? They've turned it into a pejorative, a negative term, but really radical means dealing with issues at their root cause. Why is it and how is it that people are suffering? So in any case, I just want to clarify that for folks who are listening. Michelle, do you want to pick up that thread and talk about whatever you want to talk about?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I want to talk about, in addition to the yes anding, more a development focus, because one of the things on our strategy takeaways is development. And I think sometimes as progressives, we could be a little scared about that and stuff, even though I think overall we're very good at it. Um, but the reality is, we want organizations or things that we're in to exist and to run and to grow and to change as the needs of our communities change. And as we win certain victories, then we move on to other victories. And in order to do that, um, part of what we do and hopefully will do is to sort of, number one, create organizations that people want to be in. A big sort of issue for me is that while I'm in a whole lot of things, I realize that not everybody can be in all the things that I'm in. And so it's about, you know, like attaching the person to to what they are best at, and making fighting for justice and fighting for equality something that is does not burn you out and stuff. It's a lot of hard work, but I think sometimes we need to sort of have things in place to manage when people are sick, to manage when people um, have kids, to manage all these different things. And to also financially move the organization forward. Now, I'm going to be be honest. This is not one of my best, one of my best skills. So this is me picking something that I'm not personally great at. But I do think that, in order for us to move forward, like, we do just need to think about what do we need. And sometimes what we need financially and otherwise is not that much. I think there's a great fear, and I think it is harder because as advocacy groups, it's not the same as being in like a 501(c)(3), where you're providing a service and therefore people are instantly going to gravitate towards you and also instantly fund your your organization. It's much easier for me to get people to support our local homeless shelter than it is to get them to support some of the things that, if they supported it, we wouldn't need the homeless. You know what I'm trying to say? We would have less homeless people and stuff, or ideally none. Um, and so I definitely understand that it's also not as an exciting thing to talk about, but I think that we developed a way to talk about it that is positive and sustaining and not coming from like having less or being intimidated by it. And I think if our organizations are places that are sort of truly set up so that everyone is using their skills and talents to the best of their ability, then as we have victories, we'll be able to like move forward and have more victories. And if we have defeats, we'll be able to talk to one another, not get overly depressed about it, and come up with different strategies to like move forward from it. So, so that takes a little bit of introspection and sort of knowing who can do what with what, and how can we support people, and how can we make our groups less, yes, about the mission. Everyone's there for the mission. That's what we're here for. But also a sort of human connection where you want to be in the trenches with this person doing this thing. So, for example, like if you have an organization and it meets in person, are you going around the county or the city where you meet? Or are you meeting in a place that maybe is good for one group, but the other group or other people have to drive 30 miles to get to a meeting all the time? And it's interesting that little things like that build up. I've seen more people leave groups less because they disagree with the ideology than these sort of human things. And I'm not trying to make everything about softness and being friends and all that other stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But activist work is work. It is incredibly hard work. And anything that we can do to make this work as engaging as possible for people who are going to be engaged in it for a long time is a good thing. And sort of realizing that there are resources out there for us and stuff. it may not seem like it's as much resources as there are for certain other types of organizations. Um, but what we're doing is just as important. It's just in a different way. And finding a way to talk to that for people who want to donate their time and their money to what we're doing. And I think that's something that we did, obviously, because I'm supposed to be visioning this backwards. Um, and that's part of the reason that we succeeded, that we were an organization that people wanted to be engaged in. And we were an organization that sustained itself and helped sustain its members. So I'm just going to leave it at that because other people probably want to talk. So I'm going to mute myself.
I, I love the way that you gave this expansive definition of development. And this is something that Nibingi brings to the table as well. And I'd actually just listening to Michelle, I just want to give you an opportunity before going over to Simon is just maybe visioning your admiration for the Occupy movement and what is it that changed the next time that the Occupy movement took root? So let's just say that we have another major Occupy movement in 2, 3, 5 years. What is it that changed? What is it that people learned from the 2011, 2012 Occupy movement that started right with this man who self-immolated in Algeria, right? The pushcart salesman, the guy who was harassed, because he came to the city square and he'd have the proper license to do his job, and then ultimately he became so depressed that he lit himself on fire and became the torch. He became the light for this movement that spread across much of the world. But what is it that changed? I'm saying past tense, projecting a few years into the future. Let's just say there's another Occupy movement, which I think is really possible. What is it that changed, do you think? What had to change for them to be more successful the next round, Nibingi?
Well, I think that the Occupy movement, it wasn't geared towards a certain goal, achievable goal. Now, there has been another movement that has been more sustainable and just as powerful, and that's Black Lives Matter. So they are changing policy in regard to police reform. I would like to see more, but they definitely had an impact. So I think that the main thing that I look at is coming up with new ideas, innovation. I think that's one of the things that's missing in the progressive movement. And I like what Michelle had to say about development, because what I find with a lot of the grassroots progressive movements, they seem to be afraid of growing. They're afraid of fundraising. When you bring up money, oh no, money's gonna corrupt us, and we do fine just with these 2 people going out leafleting. No, we're not doing fine, because the people that we're fighting against, they are buying TV commercials every election. In the mailroom in my building, the trash for the mail is stacked up to the wall from people throwing away all of this campaign literature that they don't even take up to their apartment. And the TV ads, just the amount of money that they spend, it's no way that you can combat that just with a movement without any resources. So.
Okay, so creativity, innovation is really, those are the watchwords.
Yeah.
And thinking about new ways, Michelle gave this more expansive definition of development, which is really healthy. But your point is a good one. And a lot of people who identify on the left don't like to talk about money because they're fundamentally anti-capitalist, right? And they say, well, if we're going to do that, it's going to be transactional. We can't be transactional, right? So I totally vibe with what you're saying. Simon, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll try to follow that up. Yeah, no, I'm sort of folding in the ideas that I've heard being talked about. I'm imagining, like you said, Chuck, 25 years from now, we've achieved the transformational justice in the United States, which of course includes one payer, universal health care for all. And how did we do that? Like looking back, starting from where we are now. And first of all, like questions of like the framing of this episode, the upcoming election, who won the election? It didn't matter who won the election, because we recognized we had to make fundamental change in the social justice movement. We talked previously about, the problem with organizing, the problem with getting groups to work together. We had to shift our mindset, regardless of who was the president, what the political situation is. We had to shift our mindset as a grassroots activist movement to what Michelle said. We have to, recognize that both organizations are groups of people. People need to feel good. They need to feel good and fulfilled when they're a part of these organizations and supported. They need, like Michelle said, with just like, what can we do to make sure that all the people doing this hard work, activist work, which is work, actually, are getting the support they need from their fellow members. And also, more to the point, and also, we can't be afraid. We live in neoliberalism. We live in capitalism. We can use the systems within that. And while still, rejecting the framework, we can acknowledge that we need to support people as individuals, but we also need money. We need to be able to fundraise, to organize. We recognized that it is not a contradiction to embrace the means of power in our society, organizing the human level, organizing by raising money. We recognized that, and we also recognized, to speak back to what you said earlier, Chuck, cynicism. It's not, we can't take pride in cynicism, and we can't make our work. Our organizations came together recognizing we can't make our work about showing off how we are, we're the ones who are the most pure, or the most, these other people, it's very much performative activism. We took a step back. We recognized we can't be just bury our heads in the sand and not acknowledge the people around us. We have to take the time to take some of our time to see how we can organize, be strong leaders who are willing to take a step back and work with other people, not just focus we all have our respective missions, but recognize that we're stronger together. And part of that means we have to sacrifice some of our time to focus on the other issues, the issues that are, all these social justice issues are related. They all tie into each other. They can all support each other, and yet we become siloed, right? We don't have, and when I talk to people and I say we don't have capacity. We don't have the capacity, right, to like spend time trying to build collaboration or trying to reach out. It's like, well, you'd have more capacity if we had a network of well-organized organizations that communicated together and could share the load. If we took some time from that capacity to build a coalition of organizations, then we can achieve far more in that big coalition of organizations that we could have ever achieved. So I'm sort of talking about is sort of expanding outwards, thinking internally. What do people need to stay in organizations? Organizationally, what does the organization need in terms of fundraising? Recognizing the need for that. And finally, expanding the view outwards. We expanded the view outwards and recognized that we have to compromise a little of ourselves to build a mass progressive social justice movement. And once we did that, we had the power. Like Nyabinghi said, the mayor won 10 times. The other person spent 10 times more. We had the people power. We had the organizational power to achieve transformational justice regardless of who was in the White House. You know, we had the ability to do that, and that's how we actually won transformational justice in this country, and on the way to winning transformational justice globally. That's what I see as as our success that we achieved.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. A great synthesis there, Simon, and an analysis. You just had me thinking about, like, one of the ways I think to bring our work to fulfillment is, I think all of you have said this in some form or another, is humility. And that is, think about embracing the most vulnerable among us. And so I just did just a little sketch here. Who are the most vulnerable people in our society? We met them in Baltimore, if you remember, Simon. Black, trans, immigrant, impoverished, unhoused, just as a starting point. And those are the very people that are being attacked by the right wing or being blamed for the ills in our society. The very most vulnerable populations in our society, the people are being targeted. And Nibingi, we talked about this. My introduction to Ron Dellums was an audio tape. I didn't even know he was a black man when I walked into his congressional office. And my first task was to transcribe a speech that he'd recently given. And we might as well just overlay those characteristics or those demographics, because he talked about what he referred to the people who are dumped on in society. And he used very, with relish, I mean, with vigor, with pronounced speech, he used the N-word over and over again, referring to people who were in those vulnerable spaces as the ends of the world, right? The people who are the most vulnerable. And we have to recognize them, we have to lift them up, we have to embrace them. And I think that brings that humility and that compassion that then translates into the passion and the strategy that allowed us to see that vision, to really see that vision of a beautiful future where everybody, it's all inclusive. Justice for all means justice for all, not a few, not some, and certainly not just the billionaire class who are serving themselves. These are megalomaniacs, but actually seeing that whole vision. Any final comments in the group here today? Anything you want to add to the recipe of success that we've been talking about and building toward? This is our second episode of To Your Health, One Pair States. And you can put a wrap on this at the back end here, Simon, but you want to add anything? Final thoughts, Nibingi and Michelle, our honored guests today?
Well, I want to add one word to humility, and that's will. It takes will to volunteer your time to help other people. A lot of people don't have the will to do that. And, especially when you're treading water yourself, so to take the time out to volunteer, to do the kind of work that we're doing without pay, that is humility and will. We have the will. We want to do this. Nobody is making us do this. So that's very important to me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, great comment to wrap things. Michelle, you want to add anything?
No. I guess just like I said that, my hope is that all of our organizations truly value the people that are in it and sort of embrace other organizations doing similar work.
Excellent. Simon?
I just want to say thanks. Thanks to you, Chuck. Thanks for it's a 2-hour show. It's a bit draining, but man, it's fun and it's great to have these conversations. Thanks to Nibingi and Michelle for coming in and adding their thoughts. It's been a lot of really interesting discussion. I have to say I'm getting more and more excited about doing this because I learn so much, right? And when people come together, we talk about our different ideas, those ideas come together, synthesis, this is the kind of thing we need, right? This is what the kind of way we need, this is what we need to communicate. And like I said, to have 25 years in the future built a mass movement that achieved transformational justice. So thank you to both of our guests. I'm just going to send us out here by saying thank you to our listeners so much for listening to this pre-election episode 2 of To Your Health, produced by One Pair States. You can find us on onepairstates.org. Huge thanks to GCPR Radio for hosting us on their online radio. And we are also broadcasting live currently on our Facebook page. And you may be listening to this post live on podcast platforms, YouTube, and Spotify. We are live typically every fourth Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. But next time is Thanksgiving, so we will be the first Thursday of December 5th, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. And
yeah, and also to say that we're also going to meet on December 26th,
yes,
which is the day after Christmas, though it is Kwanzaa, but that's the next meeting after that, just to kind of project forward, and a great way to celebrate Kwanzaa, I think, to bring it together. So in any case. Yeah, so December 5th and the December 26th, and then we'll be back on a fourth Thursday menu going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. And we would love anyone that comes to listen to us on Kwanzaa with our guests, whoever they may be at that time. Thank you so much to our guests. Thank you, Chuck. And we will talk to you next time. So thank you so much for joining this episode